you have these cultural things associated with ancient Israel. Why would we consider them A, binding, or B, even helpful when it comes to making decisions within our own culture as believers?
Is there any biblical case to justify getting married young? This article seems to suggest that there isn't full legal rights when younger and less intelligent.
I would say younger and less wise. Again, wisdom and intelligence are not the same things. What you need to live successfully more often than not is wisdom and not so much intelligence. But certainly the culture is you wouldn't have these numbers, 20, okay, if the culture just viewed everyone equally. So when the numbers exist, that tells you this is a cultural sign that you're not being viewed as on the same level as someone else who's crossed that point. Is there a biblical case to justify getting married young? Maybe this will sound shocking to some people, but I don't know why we need to build a biblical case on when to get married at all. By and large, this is going to be determined culturally, regardless of what we think biblically. But even with the biblical question, are these laws, or these aren't even laws? I mean, are these principles in Israelite culture, are they supposed to be somehow binding on New Testament believers? And I use the word like binding, maybe there's a better word, but are they some sort of necessary guide? Is Israelite, Near Eastern Israelite culture, is that supposed to be a guide to a modern 21st century Christian? I question that proposition, because even the law, even when you get into things like the Torah itself, the Torah legislation, even the law was planned to become obsolescent. And we know this because of principles of Gentile inclusion that get sprinkled into the narrative along the way, and hints and suggestions that we have Israelites and non-Israelites, but at some point, this really isn't the goal. The goal is to get back to Eden. The goal is to have one family, not divided up by whether you're a Jew or a Gentile. And God's going to get us back to that point. There's going to be a point where the Gentile become worshipers of Yahweh, and they're welcomed into the priesthood. This is all Old Testament stuff. So even specific points of the law, the Old Testament itself telegraphs to you that it's not supposed to be permanent. So if it's not supposed to be permanent, even at the level of law, you have these cultural things associated with ancient Israel. Why would we consider them A, binding, or B, even helpful when it comes to making decisions within our own culture as believers? I'm not against applying scripture. What I'm getting at is I question the validity of taking a point of Israelite culture and saying that this should guide the believer of today. My question is why? Why should that be our guide? And maybe it's 2 Timothy 3:16. All scripture is supposed to be profitable. Maybe that's the answer to the question. I don't know. But again, if something is designed to not be permanent, I just wonder how valuable it is as a guide. I would be looking for something that's more permanent.
I remember that there were some arguments that you are conforming your life to the world or to the scriptures. So you have to look for every scriptural reference to every facet of your life, and you have to conform it to that.
How would we do it too? Because Mike Chu pointed out the thing in Chinese culture with reverence for elders, which is not shared by a lot of cultures. I wonder if this kind of thinking or this kind of musing is probably a better word here, isn't what lends itself to what you were describing at the beginning of the program about how certain pastors will all of a sudden take it upon themselves to be the guide within each family unit. Like they're the ones who just know better, that have a better grasp of this Bible stuff. And now I'm going to direct your home by what I see or what I think I see in this or that passage. So I'm not sure of the whole premise. Israelite culture is Israelite culture. It was shared by lots of people in the ancient Near East. There's nothing sanctified by most of what you find in Israelite culture, because you can find it in a pagan culture, because they had the same set of problems. They're in the same kind of socio-monetary, economic sort of system. This is why, you get so much that is in the Torah, like in the laws of Exodus, we'll say. We'll just make it something like that. Laws about what to do with your beasts, or if you have an ox that keeps goring someone, what's your responsibility? Even setting monetary values on adults versus children. Israelite culture was shared to a very large extent by people who were not believers. There is no biblical culture, is what I'm trying to get at. There are biblical laws, but again, even the law was planned to become obsolescent. When it gets to the wider question of culture, so if we adopt a biblical culture, should we make it so that women can't inherit property unless they have the approval of male members in their family, or unless their social, economic, and historical circumstances match those of Zelophehad? If you're not in the same boat as Zelophehad, you can't inherit that piece of property. You can't buy property. What I find with people who really, want to become more Hebraic by imitating Israelite culture is they weed out all the undesirable elements, or they're not aware of a lot of the elements of Israelite culture. They're aware of, this something in this verse or that verse. Do we really want to imitate this? Is the question. I think if we really knew it well, we wouldn't want to imitate it.